This cliff face in the high desert of western Colorado. Pale gray rock, stacked in flat, even layers, baking in the sun above an empty two-lane highway. It looks like the most ordinary stone in America, except you can set it on fire, hold a match to a piece of this rock, and it burns like a lump of coal, hissing and smoking, because it isn't really stone at all. Locked inside it is oil. Not a puddle, not a seep, but an entire ocean of it, spread across 3 states and pressed into solid rock. And that's not even the strange part. Because beneath this quiet corner of Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming sits the single largest deposit of oil ever found anywhere on planet Earth. Not one of the largest. The largest. More than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia and Venezuela combined. So how did America end up sitting on the biggest oil prize in human history and barely touch a single drop of it? And why do the people who study it say it may never come out of the ground at all? The deposit is called the Green River Formation. It stretches beneath the Pisces Basin of Colorado, the Uinta Basin of Utah, and the Green River Basin of Wyoming. And the numbers attached to it are almost hard to believe. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates the formation holds as much as 3 trillion barrels of oil in place. About half of that, roughly 1.5 trillion barrels, is considered potentially recoverable. To put that in perspective, Saudi Arabia, the country most people picture when they think of oil, sits on around 260 billion barrels of proven reserves. The Green River Formation holds close to 6 times that. If this single formation were treated as its own reserve, it would contain more oil than every OPEC nation on Earth added together. One geological formation under a stretch of empty American ranch land holding more oil than the entire Middle East. And almost nobody in the country knows its name. The people who lived here knew something was in the rock long before any geologist did. The Ute people who traveled through these valleys understood that certain stones would catch fire. Early settlers learned the same thing the hard way. The story goes that a homesteader built a cabin in the shale country and made his fireplace out of the local rock because it was flat and easy to stack. On the night of his housewarming party, he lit the fire and the entire fireplace caught. The walls burned, the cabin burned. The man had built his home out of fuel. That rock earned a nickname that stuck for a century, the rock that burns. What those settlers had stumbled onto was oil shale, and by the early 1900s, word had spread that the hills of western Colorado were packed with it. The U.S. government took it seriously enough that it set aside part of the formation as a naval oil shale reserve, a strategic emergency fuel supply held in reserve for the day the nation's conventional oil ran out. On paper, America had just secured the largest energy reserve in the world. And then the real madness began. In the 1910s and 1920s, the oil shale country of Colorado went through a speculative frenzy. Companies formed overnight. Stock certificates were printed and sold to investors back east who had never seen the land. Boomtowns sprang up in the canyons. Everyone was certain that oil shale was about to make them rich because the math was undeniable. Trillions of barrels, sitting right there in the rock. But there was a problem nobody wanted to say out loud. Getting the oil out of the shale was enormously difficult and enormously expensive. And right as the shale boom was building, prospectors in Texas and Oklahoma struck vast fields of ordinary crude oil, the kind that simply flowed up out of the ground when you drilled a hole. Why cook oil out of solid rock at great cost when you could pump it straight out of the earth in Texas for pennies? The oil shale boom collapsed, the boomtowns emptied, and the largest oil deposit on the planet went quiet for the next 50 years. The reason it's so hard to extract comes down to geology and to a strange accident of deep time. Around 50 million years ago, during the Eocene epoch, this region did not look like desert at all. It was covered by an enormous system of warm, shallow lakes. Geologists call them Lake Uinta and Lake Gosutte. For millions of years, these lakes teemed with algae and microscopic life. Each year, that life bloomed, died, and sank to the lake bottom, layer upon layer mixing with fine mud. Over time, all of that organic matter was buried and compressed into the flat, papery rock we see in the cliffs today. So far, this is the same story as any oil field on Earth. Dead organisms, buried under sediment, cooked into oil. But here, something different happened. Or rather, something didn't happen. To turn that buried organic matter into liquid crude oil, the Earth has to bury it deep enough and heat it long enough to finish the process. The Green River organic matter never got there. It was buried but never cooked all the way through. What's left is a substance called kerogen, oil that is still only half made. It is oil frozen partway through its own creation. The Earth started the recipe 50 million years ago and then stopped halfway, and that is the catch that has defeated everyone who has ever tried to claim this prize. To get usable oil out of the Green River Formation, you have to finish the job the Earth left undone. You have to mine the rock, or heat it in place, and cook it artificially to temperatures of around 500 degrees, forcing the kerogen to release its oil. That takes staggering amounts of energy and water in one of the driest regions of the country. And every time in history that the world price of oil has risen high enough to make it look worthwhile, conventional oil has come flooding back and crashed the price before anyone could build the industry. Which brings us to the single most important day in this formation's modern history. A day the people of Western Colorado still call Black Sunday. In the late 1970s, oil prices spiked, the Middle East was in turmoil, and America was desperate for domestic energy. Suddenly, the trillions of barrels in the shale looked like the answer again. Exxon, the largest oil company in the country, poured billions of dollars into a project called Colony near the town of Parachute, Colorado. Thousands of workers moved in. New neighborhoods were built. The town of Parachute and the community of Battlement Mesa swelled with families who believed the oil shale age had finally permanently arrived. Then, on May 2, 1982, Exxon abruptly announced it was pulling out. In a single day, more than 2,000 people lost their jobs. The project simply stopped. Workers were told not to come back. Home values collapsed. Families who had just bought houses walked away from them. An entire regional economy built on the promise of the rock that burns evaporated overnight. Once again, the largest oil deposit on Earth had beaten everyone who came for it, and once again, it went quiet. Today, the contradiction is almost impossible to believe. The United States is currently the largest oil producer in the world, pumping millions of barrels a day out of the Permian Basin in Texas and the shale fields of North Dakota. At the same time, the country still imports crude oil from abroad, shipping it across oceans to feed American refineries. And the entire time, sitting quietly under federal land in Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming, is a deposit holding more oil than any nation on the planet. Enough on paper to supply the United States for well over a century without importing a single barrel from anyone. The oil is not hidden. Its location is mapped. Its size is measured. Government geologists have studied it for more than 100 years. It is simply oil that the world has never been able to afford to take. The largest energy reserve in human history is also the one nobody can figure out how to use. The cliff in western Colorado is still there. The rock still sits in flat gray layers above the empty highway, exactly as it has for 50 million years. You can still walk up to it, break off a piece, and set it on fire in your hand. Every barrel that defeated the speculators of the 1920s and defeated Exxon in 1982 is still down there. Untouched, waiting. The kerogen is still half made, still frozen partway through a process the Earth abandoned before humans existed. And if the calculus ever shifts, if the technology gets cheaper, if the water problem gets solved, if the price of oil climbs to a level the world has never seen and stays there, then the largest oil deposit ever discovered could finally do the one thing it has never done in a century of trying. It could change everything,